Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Context Education Podcast. It's great to have you all here for another deep dive into the world of learning. For those tuning in for the first time, a huge welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. And if you've got any burning questions or topics you'd like us to explore, please drop us a line. We love hearing from you. Now today, we're tackling something that's close to all of our hearts. How to study effectively. Whether you're prepping for a big exam or just trying to get a handle on a new skill or subject, we've all been there, right?
Absolutely.
Staring at those textbooks, highlighter in hand, hoping anything will stick. But the truth is, effective studying is a bit more nuanced than just reading and rereading.
It really is.
So we're going to break down some proven strategies that can help you make the most of your study time.
Sounds good.
So first things first, where do we even begin? What are the foundational steps?
Well, I think one of the most crucial things is to set clear goals for yourself.
Okay, so what do I want to achieve by the end of this study session?
Exactly. And then from there, you can create a structured study schedule.
So you're talking about actually blocking out time in my day dedicated to studying.
Yeah, and this might sound simple, but it makes a world of difference. You're much more likely to stick to your studies if you have a plan.
Makes sense.
Ah.
So instead of those late night cram sessions that we're all guilty of,
Oh, well.
it's more about consistency over time.
Precisely. It's about breaking down those study sessions into manageable chunks with short breaks.
Okay, so 25-minute blocks with a 5-minute break. I've heard about that.
Yeah, things like that. You can experiment and see what works for you.
Right. So once we've got our goals and our schedules sorted, what about the environment? Does that really play a role in how well we study?
It plays a huge role, I'd say. You want to create a dedicated study space that's free of distractions.
Oh, no TV, no phone.
Exactly. Find a
Oh.
quiet, well-lit area where you can really focus.
I'm already feeling more relaxed just thinking about it. Maybe some noise-canceling headphones too.
That's a great idea. Anything that helps you minimize those external distractions.
Okay, so we've got our space set up. We're feeling focused. What are some actual techniques we can use to make sure the information is sinking in?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, passive reading isn't going to cut it.
Right. We need to be more active.
Exactly. And one of the most effective techniques for doing that is called active recall.
Active recall. So what's that all about?
It's basically about quizzing yourself. After you read a section, close the book and try to recall the key concepts without looking.
Oh, I see. So it's like testing yourself to see what you actually remember.
Exactly. You can do this by summarizing the information out loud, creating flashcards, or even teaching the material to an imaginary audience.
Okay, that sounds like a fun way to do it. The imaginary audience part.
It can be, and it really forces you to engage with the material on a deeper level.
But let's be real, even with active recall, we all forget things over time.
Oh, we do.
So is there a way to combat that natural forgetting process?
Absolutely. There's a technique called spaced repetition that can help with that.
Spaced repetition. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's all about strategically timing your review sessions. So you're revisiting information just before you're likely to forget it.
So it's kind of like giving your memory a little nudge
Yeah.
right when it needs it.
You got it. Imagine you learn a new vocabulary word.
Hmm.
With spaced repetition, you'd review it the next day, then a few days later, then a week later, and so on.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're basically reinforcing that memory each time, making it less likely to fade away.
Exactly. It's a really powerful technique for long-term retention.
And speaking of making things stick, you mentioned earlier that everyone learns differently.
Yes, definitely.
So how do we figure out what type of learner we are? And more importantly, how do we use that to our advantage when we're studying?
Well, it's all about experimenting and paying attention to what works best for you.
Okay, so what are some examples of different learning styles?
Sure. So some people are visual learners. They learn best by seeing things like diagrams, charts, or mind maps.
Okay, so visual learners are all about those visuals. Makes
Agreed.
sense.
Then you have auditory learners. They thrive on listening to information, whether it's lectures, audiobooks, or even just having discussions about the material.
So for them, it's all about hearing the information.
Exactly. And then you have kinesthetic learners. They learn best by physically interacting with the concepts.
So they're the hands-on learners, right?
Precisely. They might build models, act out scenes, or find other ways to get their bodies involved in the learning process.
So it's all about figuring out which camp you fall into and then tailoring your study approach accordingly.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to mix and match different techniques.
Right. It's not like you have to be exclusively one type of learner.
Exactly. You can experiment and find what works best for you.
And while we're talking about approaches to studying, I think it's important to emphasize that memorization isn't everything.
You're absolutely right.
It's great for facts and figures. But true understanding goes deeper than that.
It does. It's about grasping the underlying concepts and being able to apply that knowledge in different contexts.
So instead of just trying to memorize everything verbatim, we should be focusing on making connections and seeing the bigger picture.
Precisely. Try to connect the dots, see how different ideas relate to each other, and find real-world examples that illustrate the concepts.
That's a really good point, because sometimes I get so caught up in the details that I lose sight of the overall meaning.
I understand.
Yeah.
And it's easy to fall into that trap, but by focusing on understanding rather than just rote memorization, you're much more likely to retain that information in the long run.
And, speaking of the bigger picture, I think it's important to acknowledge that studying can be tough.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be stressful, and sometimes we need a little help along the way.
That's so true. Don't be afraid to reach out for support when you need it.
Support. So, like, who should we be reaching out to?
Well, it could be your teachers, classmates, tutors, or even just friends and family who can offer encouragement and a listening ear.
It's like having a cheer squad in your corner.
Exactly. And
People-
sometimes just talking through a concept with someone else can help you understand it better.
And, of course, we can't forget about self-care.
Absolutely.
Taking care of our physical and mental well-being is crucial for optimal learning.
You're right. Sleep, nutrition, hydration, exercise. These all play a role in how effectively our brains function.
It's like treating your brain like an athlete. Give it the fuel and rest it needs to perform at its best.
Exactly. And remember, the most effective learning is the learning that you genuinely enjoy.
So true. So find what works for you, experiment, and don't be afraid to think outside the box.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into effective study techniques. We've covered a lot of ground today, from setting goals and creating a study schedule to embracing different learning styles and prioritizing understanding over rote memorization. But most importantly, we want you to remember that you are in control of your learning journey. So experiment, play around with these techniques, and find what clicks for you. After all, the most effective learning is the learning that you genuinely enjoy. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode.